This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 407, part 2, entitled Duty to Posterity. Going straight on. I see masculists doing the above in the current decade and probably in the 2030s as well. Look how long it took the second wave feminists writing in the 1960s to influence young working class women today of the basic ideas of feminism. You could say it took half a century. However, thanks to the internet and its enormous power to influence minds, my estimation is that the masculists will be able to persuade the majority of men to think as masculists in about half that time. So if so, then the masculists will force the gender political pendulum to swing to its lowest point. The divorce courts will be men-fared, the para will be legislated, women will be forced to fip up or won't get a man. Young men will be putting enormous moral pressure on young women to be fips or be totally rejected from society, so that everyone by then will be bi-conscious, that is, will have had both their feminist and masculist consciousnesses raised. But getting to this point may take a generation, so the world population by then will probably be a lot lower, so that the politicians will be very aware of the crashing population and will be taking measures to ensure that it does not continue to crash for generations, because that would mean that we wipe ourselves out. So drastic means will become necessary to stop this downward spiral. So what can be done? It's at this point that I take off my masculist theorist's hat and put on my demographic politicians, that's population controllers, hat, and start thinking hard about how to stop whole populations from wiping themselves out due to inappropriate gender political values. One major idea in this regard is the concept of the duty to posterity, as appears in the title of this flyer. The core idea here is that a given living generation has a moral duty to not contribute to the continuous falling of the size of the population by ensuring that the birth rate is over the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman. How can this be done? I do see that it is a good thing that men continue to reject paternity for another generation, so that the world total population reaches about 500 million, brackets, the Georgia Guidestones recommendation, or thereabouts. Hence I see that a rather hefty dose of social engineering and government propaganda will be needed to cause a U-turn in men's attitudes towards being fathers again. Hence, quietly in the background, the demographic politicians, that's DPs, need to keep a close eye on the world population trends and intervene when necessary so that the population does not fall so low that we wipe ourselves out. In the meantime, gender politicians need to time the men-faring of the gender laws so that when the moment of a need for a U-turn in men's paternity attitudes arrives, then society by then will already have been men-fared. The divorce courts will have been reformed so that it is safe for men to be fathers again. The para will have been legislated. Women will all have fipped up, so that women are forced to have equal rights and equal obligations with men. That is, sharing equally the burden of earning the living by bothering to get a career-competent education at high school and college. Not expecting fluffy style to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man. Once all the gender political prerequisites above have been implemented and the world population figure has fallen sufficiently for the global warming problem to have been solved, then the socially engineered U-turn can be implemented by governments. How do I propose that this be done? Will it be necessary to set up baby farms where governments pay millions of women to have lots of kids, taxing men to pay for both the women breeders and child raisers and their kids? This would be one possible solution. although far from ideal, since research shows that single mothers make appalling parents. The reality is that children of single mothers are much more likely to suffer from such maladies as greater suicide rates, more alcoholism, more teenage pregnancies, more depression, higher crime rates, more delinquency, more drug addiction, etc. In short, even though governments may be forced to create baby farms if men continue to reject paternity for reasons other than today's usual hatred of the massive injustices committed by the divorce courts against divorcing fathers in the fluffy feminist hypocrite-dominated divorce court system, there may be other reasons why men will continue to reject paternity. For example, that kids are too expensive, that men like their careers too much, that governments don't provide sufficient financial subsidies to parents, etc. Far more preferable will be to use government propaganda methods to foster up duty to posterity in the population, preaching ideas that the responsibility for the production of the next generation and the next after the next, that is posterity, is the duty of everyone, since everyone is the posterity of the earlier generation and the generation before that. Thus, governments can really push the idea that both sexes and that everyone has a moral duty to play an active role in the creation and fostering of the next generation by creating gender laws that encourage men to be fathers again, so that men get to keep their kids, unlike in the hated, that is by men, fluffy feminist-dominated divorce court system, in which one married father in 4 will have his kids ripped away from him, which is a war issue in the eyes of the masculists, as well as in the eyes of many female masculists as well. Laws need to be passed so that women can stay at home raising small kids for 6 years, a time necessary for a second kid to go to kindergarten, and be paid a government subsidy equal to what she was earning just before she birthed her first child, after having worked for, say, 5 years after graduating with a career competent diploma, which will be a lot more likely after considerable moral pressure has come from the masculists on women to fip up or be severely punished by not getting a man. Research shows that children are far happier when they are raised by both a mother and a father. With future technologies, particularly the phenomenon of BRAD, that's bit rate annual doubling, that is, the internet speed doubles each year, it's likely that bit rates will be so high that 3D images will be as real, so that the human eye will not be able to distinguish between a natural image in the real world and an image formed artificially with a bit rate that is orders of magnitude faster than what we have today. In 30 years, 2 to the power 30 is 1 billion times faster than internet speeds we have today. With such fabulous internet speeds, working from home will probably become the norm for many couples, so commuting to work will be much less common. So people will be able to spread out over the countryside so that cities depopulate, land prices decrease in the cities and rise in the sparsely populated countryside as market forces spread out the population. With people changing jobs merely by changing the destinies of their super real 3D imagery, people will be able to live in villages where the village population is small enough for people to know each other so that kids can be raised by the tribe rather than by couples. By involving fathers more closely in the raising of kids, kids will grow up far more healthily so that the classic inferiorities of single mother raised kids will be avoided. Governments can really push the idea via the media, textbooks, ads, etc., that the well-being of future generations is the business of everybody, of both sexes, that men need to be as concerned with raising the next generation as women, although women have the desire to grow and raise kids built into them more than men, since women evolved to grow and raise kids. As AI, that's artificial intelligence, becomes increasingly intelligent, robots will do most of the work, so that humans can be spared the boredom and tedium of traditional labour, freeing them up to pursue other interests, e.g. parenting, and making children happy by giving them lots of attention. Governments need to reorient themselves away from scarcity-based economics, which emphasise economic efficiencies, to happiness-based economics, trying to raise gross national happiness, which can be quantified and measured. Already some countries are pursuing these policies. It will be necessary to change the zeitgeist in terms of child raising, particularly for men, especially when AI robots do most of the work, which is coming for sure in the next generation. These AI intelligent machines will free both men and women from concentrating their lives on careers and earning a living, and allow them to de-emphasize making money and to emphasize the joys and the moral obligations to raise the next generation and to raise them to be happy and fulfilled. Governments will push the idea that the well-being of the next generation and the next, that is posterity, is the concern of everyone, of both sexes, and will push the concept, the duty of posterity, a post-gender political concept whose time has not yet come, perhaps in a generation, that just possibly I might live long enough to see. I'm now in my 70s. My father lived to 100, so maybe I will too, since I have his longevity genes. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, and e-textbook of 400 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website.